I want to start this video by describing something, and I want you to tell me in the comments if any of this feels familiar. You sit down at your desk and you know exactly what you need to do. You have all the skills to do it. You have done it many times before, and yet you cannot start. And it's not because you're tired, it's not because you don't care, not because you don't have time. You just you can't make yourself begin. So you reorganize your space, you answer a few emails, you make another coffee, and the task sits there just staring at you until at some point, hours later or days later, maybe, or even the night before, if you're like me, before it's due, something finally kicks in and you do the whole thing in a fraction of the time you spent avoiding it. And then you tell yourself the same thing you always tell yourself. And it sounds something like, I just need to be more disciplined. I just need to try harder. Or you might ask yourself the question, why am I like this? If any part of that just described your life, this video is for you. So today we're going to talk about something that almost never gets named correctly in high achievers, and it's how ADHD actually shows up when you have spent your entire life appearing successful on the outside. But more than that, we're going to talk about the quiet shame that comes from feeling like you should be further along by now, and what that struggle is like with ADHD. Because that shame, in my professional and personal experience, is the most expensive symptom of unsupported ADHD and high achievers. And I want to talk about it and talk about why. When most people picture ADHD, they picture a hyperactive child who can't sit still. And that picture is doing enormous damage to the adults who are quietly struggling. Because ADHD and high achievers, particularly in women, in professionals, and people who learned early how to mask, almost never looks like that. It looks more like a successful career and a chaotic personal life, or crushing your major projects and being unable to respond to a simple text for 3 weeks. It's being known as the responsible one in your family and feeling like a fraud inside your own head, holding it together for everyone else while your home, your inbox, your unfinished projects, and your own self care fall completely apart. It could also look like having achieved a great deal and being deeply confused about how you actually managed any of it, because from the inside, you don't feel impressive. You feel disorganized, inconsistent, exhausted by your own brain. You feel like everyone else got a manual you did not get. And underneath all of it, there is actually, or usually, a quiet, persistent voice that says, I should be so much further along by now. And that voice, that is the one that I want to talk about today, because almost everyone with high achieving ADHD has it. And it might sound differently, but almost nobody understands where it actually comes from. I want to give you the science, because I think when you understand what is actually happening in your brain, something begins to shift. Your motivation is regulated by a neurotransmitter called dopamine. And dopamine is not the pleasure chemical or just the pleasure chemical as it is often described. Dopamine is the anticipation of reward chemical. It is what makes your brain decide this task is worth starting. In a neurotypical brain, dopamine is released in adequate amounts to make ordinary, important tasks feel doable, even when they aren't particularly exciting. You can pay the bills, you can send the email, you can fold the laundry. But in an ADHD brain, the dopamine system functions differently. And research published in Molecular Psychiatry found that adults with ADHD have significantly reduced dopamine receptor and transporter availability in the reward pathways of the brain. And that this is the difference that is directly correlated with measurable motivation deficits. So, what that means in plain language is your brain is not lazy. Your brain is not undisciplined. Your brain is operating with less of the chemical it needs to find ordinary tasks rewarding enough to initiate. So now here's the part that is most useful to understand. An ADHD nervous system is what neuroscientists called interest based. A neurotypical brain is largely importance based. Something is important, so the brain mobilizes to do it. In the ADHD brain, it runs on a completely different operating system. It is activated by four things: interest, novelty, urgency, and challenge. Importance alone does not generate enough dopamine to initiate actions, which is why you can write a 30-page report in one day before it's due, but cannot make yourself write the first sentence 2 weeks earlier when there was no urgency. It is not a discipline problem, it is a neurochemistry problem. And there's a profound difference between those designations. This is the place where I most need you to sit with, because this is where the deepest shame usually lives. So I want you to think about something in your own life, a project that you started that was working, a pursuit that you were genuinely good at, something that for a while had momentum. And then at some point, you let go. You just let go, not because it failed, not because you didn't have the skills, but because something inside you simply could not stay engaged once it stopped feeling new. And I want to share something personal with you here. Years ago, long before YouTube was a viable platform for the kind of content that I'm creating now, I started a blog talk radio show. And by most measures, it was successful. I had built something at a time when most people didn't even conceptualize what online audio platforms could become. But somewhere along the way, once the dopamine of the new had settled, once it stopped feeling fresh and started feeling like maintenance, I lost interest and I let go. And for years, I have carried the story that I should have stuck with it, that if I had just kept going, I would be so much further along right now. That somehow in my mind, I missed an opportunity, that my inability to sustain things has cost me a lot of time, a lot of energy. And that story has lived inside me as evidence of personal failure. But here's what I want to say to you today as I understand it, because I'm still learning to say it to myself as well. And is that that was not failure. That was an ADHD brain doing exactly what an ADHD brain does. It mobilized around novelty, urgency, and challenge. And when the maintenance phase set in, when the dopamine that initiated the pursuit was no longer being generated by the pursuit itself, it could not sustain the engagement. And this is not a character flaw. This is a documented neurological pattern. And the most painful part for me and for so many of the high achieving ADHD adults I have worked with over the years is that nobody ever told us this. So we filled in our own explanation, our own narrative, and our own explanation and narrative was almost always cruel, at least for me. And we decided we were flaky, that we decided that we lacked grit. We decided that we were not the kind of person who could finish what they started. And we watched other people stay with their thing, and we made it mean something about our worth. This is where I want to spend some time, because I don't think this gets named honestly enough. There's a particular kind of shame that high achieving ADHD adults carry, and it is not a loud shame. It's not a dramatic shame. It is the quiet, persistent voice that runs underneath everything you do. The shame like, I should be further along by now, or look at what other people have built. Look at the all the things that I started and didn't finish. Look at the opportunities that I let slip away. It is the shame of watching peers stay with one thing long enough to build a career while you have started and let go of 5 careers worth of ideas in the meantime. It is the shame of having more vision than you have been able to execute. It is the shame of being someone with 1,000 good ideas in a graveyard of unfinished projects. It also could be the shame of looking at your own resume and feeling like you can hardly explain how the pieces fit together. And as you get older, this shame gets heavier because the math feels different. At 30, there is plenty of runway. At 40, you can still tell yourself it's not too late. At 50 and at almost 60, where I am right now, there is a particular grief that arrives. And that grief sounds like, what if I had understood this sooner? How much further along could I be? How many years did I spend blaming myself for something that was never within my conscious control? I want to honor that grief because it is real and because I don't think you can heal what you will not name. But I also want to challenge something. I want to challenge the story that you have lost time, the story that you should be further along, the story that your inability to sustain things has cost you everything. And I want to challenge that story, not to dismiss the pain, but because I think the story is leaving something critical out. The things you started and let go of were not failures. They were chapters that taught you something your brain needed you to know. The blog talk radio I started that I have spent years grieving was not a failure that I abandoned. It was a chapter that taught me what my brain could and could not sustain. It taught me that I have vision. It taught me that I can build something before the infrastructure exists. It taught me what activates my engagement and what causes my engagement to fade. So I didn't waste those years. I collected evidence about myself that almost nobody collects until very late in life. And I want to say this directly to whoever is watching this video right now. Every project that you started, every idea you executed for a while, every pursuit that you let go of, everything you cannot stop second guessing, those were not wasted years. Those were your brain teaching you who you are. And the cruelest irony of high achieving ADHD is this: we're so busy looking at what we didn't finish that we cannot see what we are actively building. And the vision was real, the execution was real, the impact was real. The fact that we did not sustain something for 30 years does not erase what we did create. And I believe we need to start counting those years differently. Most productivity advice was designed for neurotypical brains. Make a list, break it into steps, just start. Use a planner, be disciplined. None of those address the actual problem, because the problem is not that you don't know what to do. You know exactly what to do. The problem is that your brain can't generate enough dopamine to initiate the action. And willpower alone does not produce dopamine. So, this is why every productivity system eventually fails you, or at least it failed me. You buy the planner, it works for 2 weeks, then you stop opening it and you feel worse than before because now you have evidence of yet another thing you can't or couldn't stick with. And the system didn't fail you because you are broken. The system failed because it was built for a brain that is not yours. So you need a different strategy. So here are a few strategies that I found helpful for me over the past several years. And these are grounded in how the ADHD reward system actually works and how to work with it instead of against it. The first one is body doubling, and this is one of the most evidence supported productivity strategies for ADHD adults. Body doubling means doing a task while another person is simply present. They don't have to help you, they don't have to talk to you, they just exist in your space, reading. They could be working on their own thing, knitting, whatever it is. And why it works is because the presence of another person activates social motivation networks in your brain that bypass the executive function bottleneck. And it can be in person, it can be on a video call. There are an entire body doubling communities online where you join a Zoom room, for example, with strangers. You mute yourself and just work alongside each other in silence. So if you struggled to start a task alone for hours, try body doubling, doing it with another human in the room or on a screen. For me, I was just stunned as to how this really works, and it works. The second is manufacturing urgency without cortisol. So here's the thing. Most high-achieving ADHD adults run on cortisol-fueled urgency. We wait until the last minute, panic activates dopamine, and then we can perform. That works in the short term, but it destroys our nervous system in the long term. But the principle underneath it is true. Your brain responds to urgency. So the question becomes, can we manufacture urgency without burning our nervous system to the ground? And the answer to that is yes. So set a 5-minute timer, just 5 minutes, and tell yourself that you're only going to work on this for 5 minutes. And when the timer goes off, you can stop. The urgency of the ticking timer activates the brain's interest-based system. And most of the time, once you've started, momentum will carry you through. But the agreement with yourself has to be real. You can't manufacture that. And if after 5 minutes you genuinely want to stop, then stop. I've done that before. And this is not a manipulation tactic. It's a contract with you and your nervous system. The third one is temptation bundling. And this one comes from behavioral economics research and works exceptionally well with ADHD brains. You pair a task that your brain does not want to do with something that immediately produces dopamine. So the boring task, or the one that you're not interested in, gets done, but it gets done while you're getting a hit of something pleasurable, which keeps your dopamine system engaged. So an example would be only listening to your favorite podcast while folding laundry, or only watching your favorite show while sorting through emails, or you can have your favorite coffee while doing paperwork that you've been avoiding. The dopamine from the pleasurable thing actually helps fuel the completion of the unpleasant thing. The fourth strategy is lower the activation threshold dramatically, and most ADHD adults set tasks too large for their brain to initiate. So we say something like clean the entire kitchen. Well, that might be too big. So put one mug in the sink is small enough that your brain doesn't activate the resistance response. Behavior activation research consistently shows that ADHD brains can begin movement when the requested action is small enough to feel embarrassingly easy. So we're not aiming at productivity, you're aiming for momentum. One sentence written, one email sent, one drawer open. Momentum is dopamine. The fifth strategy is externalize everything. ADHD brains have impaired working memory, meaning the mental space where you hold what you're supposed to be doing has less capacity than a neurotypical brain. And this is why you walk into a room and forget why. This is why you have 10 browser tabs open and don't know which one was the important one. It's also why you cannot keep a mental to-do list. Your working memory is full before you begin. So here's the strategy. Get everything out of your head and into the visible world, like sticky notes. You've heard this before. Whiteboards, a single notebook, a timer on your phone, a visible task list on your desk that's not buried in an app somewhere. So if you can't see it, your ADHD brain will treat it as if it does not exist. Has to be visible. I want to close with something I deeply believe, and something I am still learning to believe about myself. You are not starting over. You are starting with knowledge for the first time. Everything you have built up to this point Every project, every chapter, every pursuit you let go of was being built without an accurate understanding of your own brain. And that means you were doing exceptionally difficult work with no map. The work you do from this point forward with awareness, with self compassion, with strategies that actually fit how your brain operates is qualitatively different from the work you did before. You are not behind. I am not behind. You are finally working with your brain instead of against it. And that changes everything. And here's what I want most for you to hear, because I had to say it to myself before I could say it to anyone else. It is not too late. It is not too late at 40. It is not too late at 50. It is not too late at almost 60. It is simply not too late. The decades of accumulated self understanding that you carry, that most people will never acquire in their lifetime, is its own form of capital. Everything you built or build from here is being built on top of a self awareness that took you a lifetime to earn. And that is not falling short. That is exactly the work you were meant to do. If this video resonated with you in any way, if you've been carrying the secret weight of an ADHD brain that the world keeps telling you should be functioning differently, then I want you to know something. You're not broken. You're not lazy. You're not a fraud. You have not lost time. You have a brain that works differently, and you have been trying to use it the same way everyone else uses theirs. And it is not your fault that it has not worked. And it is not too late to learn how to actually work with the brain you have. Before you go, I want to ask you something. What is one project you started and let go of that you have been quietly grieving? You don't have to tell me what it was. Just acknowledge that it existed. And then if you are willing, drop the number of the strategy that you're going to try first this week. So is it body doubling? Is it the 5-minute timer or temptation bundling? Maybe it's lowering the threshold or externalizing your task. 1 through 5. No explanation needed. And I read every comment. And so drop me a number and I might use your responses to shape the next video in this series. So thank you for being here, and thank you for coming along this journey in exploring possibilities for the heart and mind.